Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Kep, co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to today's webinar. We're excited about this topic, which will be looking at how employers can maximize the wide-ranging benefits of employee experience that's both positive and engaging. But before we get started, I want to share something special we have for today's attendees. One of our monthly virtual conferences is coming up on Wednesday, April 6th, and it's titled Managing the Human Impact of Digital Transformation. It's going to be really valuable for employers who are transitioning to new digital tools and monitoring the varied and influential effect of this change on their employees. Thanks to our partners, including today's sponsor, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those who joined today's webinar, and that's you. I'm putting a link in the chat space now, and this is an offer you'll want to take advantage of. The regular price for our conference tickets is $149, and this link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole day's activities. Today, we'll be exploring the topic, the hidden impact of positive employee experience and how to enhance it. The whole journey your employees take through your organization will affect their productivity, their engagement, their well-being, and retention. What are the pillars of that experience, from meaningful work and a productive environment to growth opportunities and trust in leadership? How can employers create a process for empathizing with their employees at every step of their experience and design solutions to respond to the issues that might come up? Our sponsor today is Hibob. I'll tell you a bit about them. Hibob was founded to modernize HR tech. Hibob's intuitive and data-driven platform, Bob, was built for the way people work today, globally, remotely, and collaboratively. Since its launch in 2015, Bob has become the HR information system of choice for more than 1,800 companies who understand that a powerful, agile HR tech suite is a key driver of organizational success. Now, a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have information on how you can get professional development credits for this session from both the Society of Human Resource Management and the HR Certification Institute. And look out for a written account of the conversation on our website at fromdayone.co. Now, for the audience, about 45 minutes into the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime you think of them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Emily McCrary Ruiz Esparza. Emily is a freelance journalist based in Richmond, Virginia, who writes about workplace culture and policies, hiring, DEI, and issues faced by women. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post, Fast Company, and Food Technology, among others, and has been syndicated by MSN and The Motley Fool. Okay, Emily, take it away.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm very happy to be here with four of you today to talk about employee experience, which not only do you all facilitate in your roles, but your employees who experience your workplaces as well. So I expect you all to come both as experiencers and facilitators of experience. I'd like to start by having all of our panelists introduce themselves. Tell us about what you do in your role and what to you personally has meant a good employee experience. It could be at the company where you currently work or any experience you've had in a professional environment. We'll start with Luciana first.
Hi, Emily, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. So I am the global head of employee experience at HP. I have been in this role for 7 years since HP separated from the Hewlett-Packard company, and we're the company that produces the laptops and printers, all the products that you know and love. And I think we're enough of a household name that I don't need to belabor the point. I was thinking about what my favorite employee experience is for myself, because I always say this to my team that to be able to create a great experience for others, we need to be having a great experience ourselves. It's very hard to do that if you're not. And so I have been lucky enough to work for CHRO that I've worked for a couple times in my career. I've followed her because of her enlightenment, and she had been the CHRO at HP for the first 6 years since separation. And for me, the thing that really made a difference was how she made me feel. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Maya Angelou quote, right? People will forget what you say, they'll forget what you do, they'll never forget how you made them feel. That is, to me, the key to a great employee experience. The bells and whistles help, and we'll talk a little bit about them over the next hour. But the real crux of a great experience is how we make each other feel. And in my case, I was lucky enough to have a manager who knew this and was able to create this for me. And so the anecdote is that I'd get home on a day when I had a one-on-one with Tracy Keogh, who's the person I'm talking about, and my husband would be like, "Oh, did you have a one-on-one again? You're all bouncing around. You're all excited." So it's how we make each other feel that I think is the basis of a great employee experience.
Thanks, Luciana. Kat?
So, hi, everyone. I'm Kat Anderson. I'm the Director of Corporate HR for Light and Wonder. And essentially what I do is I serve as the lead HRBP in support of our corporate teams. And I also am a part of our DE&I initiatives through our task force committee focused around retention and belonging for our employees. That's an area that I have a fair amount of passion, and I'm super grateful that I work for a company that actually has a very strong focus around that as part of our employee experience. And Light and Wonder, you may wonder who we are. And we are the global leader in cross-platform games and entertainment. In essence, if you've ever walked into one of the casinos, you've probably seen and maybe even played one of our games and had a lot of fun doing it. But we don't stop with just that. We offer a variety of digital channels. We have unmatched technology and distribution, and a lot of that success is guided by our culture. In our culture, we value daring teamwork, creativity, and we build a lot of new worlds of play. And we have a lot of fun while doing it. And much like what Luciana expressed, I too am very fortunate to work for a CHRO that very much has a focus on the success of our organization through our employee engagement and experience. And to that end, she's been a great leader and mentor to me personally, and provides me with opportunities and feedback to continue to grow and develop and improve in what I do day to day. And that's really key, both the leadership that you experience and the relationship that you have with your leaders, as well as many of the initiatives and programs offered through an organization for engagement and positive employee experience.
Great. Thank you, Kat. Larry, what about you? Let's go to you next.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Larry McAlister. I'm the head of talent acquisition and talent enablement at NetApp. We're headquartered in Silicon Valley. I've really been in an HR business transformation and an HR transformation to move more to the cloud. And so we've done a lot of work on transforming the way that managers and employees work together, talk to each other, changing the mindset of HR is not here to babysit you, we're here to enable you. And the past year brought in a lot of technology. So glad Andy's on the call. I say we're in the golden age of HR technology. We're caught up to everybody else with an AI and everything that we do. So it's super exciting. So we're about 11,500 employees around the world. So for me, employee experience is two parts of me. One is voice and one is fingerprints. So if your voice matters in an organization, it's being solicited or listened to or implemented, you feel valued. You feel like this is a great place for me to be. So everyone probably has a survey, right? You ask the employees for their voice in a survey, but the number we look at most is, I believe something can be done with this survey. If that number remains high, that means the organization is valuing the employee voice because something's happening with that impact. And the fingerprint one is really around, do I have my fingerprints on the success of the organization or the success of my personal organization? Right? If people feel like what I'm doing matters and I see success, so my voice and my fingerprint are working all the time, you're just killing it. And it's a great experience to have. And you just feel like, wow, what I do matters here. And really, and I think Luciana said about it, there's all the bells and whistles and all the stuff that every company does, but that's the unique one. if you really care about your employees and what they're saying, what they're doing, and it all matters, it's just a great feeling as a human. So that's the two that I talk about most. Thank you.
Annie, last but not least.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Rosencrantz. I'm the Director of People and Culture at Hibob. I've been here about 5 months, and my role is really to own the US HR operations. So building a lot of the infrastructure to get us set up for growth. We're growing really quickly and making sure we have the systems and processes in place so that we can support our employees. And then also on the engagement side, we have employees all over the country. We have a mix of hybrid and remote. So unlocking that the mystery behind how do we drive engagement in this very new world of work. So it's a work in progress, but I'm sure we'll touch on some of those themes today. And then in terms of answering the question about employee experience, I do agree with a lot of the points that have already been raised. For me, it's really about authentic connection, whether it's with your manager, with peers, having someone or multiple people that you feel like understand you and who you understand better to enable you to work better together. I think automatically, the second you know a little bit more about what's going on in someone's personal life, their home situation, it will automatically ease that relationship, and it makes you feel more connected to not only that person, but your company overall. So I don't think it's about any specific activity or thing that the company's doing. It's just creating opportunities for those connections.
You guys are going to make my job really difficult today. Everybody talked about the intangible experience of working at a company. It's not so much about programs. You know, I heard the words relationships, authentic connection, voice. It's so far beyond, oh, we have this great program of ERGs, which are a great thing, but it's really about the results of programs like that. So yeah, you've made my job not very easy today, but I'm actually happy to learn now because I feel like we're going to find out so many more different things. So I want to come back to you, Annie, actually, because it's about the result of programs. It's about how an employee feels, whether they feel valued, whether they feel heard and seen. How do you think about balancing employee experience from a corporate level, thinking company-wide, with an individual's needs and how you can make sure an individual person feels valued? Annie, what do you think about that?
So the way I think about that is ownership. So at the corporate level, the people responsible for the company level initiatives and employee experience, that's senior leadership, and that's people and culture, or HR. They're looking at the big picture of what do we need to drive engagement and retention and attract talent. At the individual level, I think that ultimately comes down to management. That's managers are the closest to their team in understanding what's going on. I just talked about connection and understanding the full person, not just the person they present at work. So the manager knows best about what are they going through, what challenges are they having, are they an attrition risk, and they can then address them one-on-one, or if there's a challenge or an employee engagement issue that they don't have the answers for or the solution for, they can then escalate that to their HR BP or someone else in the organization who can address those individual challenges. And maybe when they present those ideas, the company will realize there's a theme here. This is not an individual challenge. This is actually something that this department is feeling, or the employees in this location are feeling, and then they can take a more strategic, big picture approach. But to the point about individual challenges, those will inevitably happen, and it's ultimately on the manager to have their ear to the ground and address those.
I just want to add one thing to what Annie's saying real quick. So before the pandemic, if you were in the office and you said, hey, how are you? That was a throwaway line, right? It was just something to say when you walked into a meeting. During the pandemic, when you asked someone how they were, you really, really wanted to know how they were. Like the personal connection and grace became so much more powerful that I think we're all more attuned to that. So I think Annie makes a great point there.
Yeah, Larry, I would agree. And I was actually going to harken back to something that you said about, people not just having the opportunity to weigh in, but also feeling like they were listened to. And Annie's point just now tied back to that very nicely. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that the circumstances of the past couple of years made us all, to use another word that Annie put out there, more authentic about connecting with each other. And so I think the opportunity now for all of us as HR professionals is to, or communications, or whatever area we may be in that feeds into the employee experience, is how do we leverage that? How do we harness that and not let it get away from us? Because we've gotten to such a level of authentic connection that we need to make sure that the systems and processes are in place to take that to the next level. And I think that's where it may be a little bit more challenging than it seems.
So I wonder if one of the ways to connect the individual experience with how things just in some cases have to be administered on a corporate level is having the ability and the, we'll say, infrastructure in place to notice patterns. And it sounded like that's the point you raised, like a manager might be noticing something going on and going, hey, maybe this is not just this one person who's experiencing this. I'm wondering if it's a team thing or even a sector thing. Do you all have an approach for noticing specific patterns? Anybody here on the?
Yeah, so across the enterprise, the way that technology has advanced so much, you have a myriad ways, right? So there's the basic survey, which we put in the hands of the managers, work on your team, but we'll look for patterns across the enterprise. We have a mobile coaching. So you can see behind the scenes, what are people asking their coaches about, and see some thematic things there. And then a third one is we have a opportunity marketplace technology where you can get gigs and look for new jobs and look for development. And you get patterns of what are people looking for? Where do their growth want to be? And if you combine those three things together, that informs my talent strategy and the education of the organization of what's going on. And I think in the old days, before AI came in, you were just stuck with a bunch of questions and answers that you had to rifle through. And you look at comments on your survey, be like, that's not true. I know who said that. So I think AI has sped us up to more personal connections.
Well, and I think to build upon that, we've experienced a tremendous amount of change over the last several years worldwide. A pandemic very much changed our approach on how we engage in the workplace and how we look for those connections that we're ensuring that we have with employees, both as managers and employees. And to your point, Larry, when we're looking to be sure that our employees' mental health and well-being is in essence in place, we've engaged with EAP very heavily in the last few years, offered a whole variety of training classes, toolboxes of support for our management, as well as for our employees. So our managers become more adept and more comfortable with, in essence, stepping forward, engaging with their employees, and also ferreting out issues that they may identify so we can help partner with that employee to address and hopefully provide necessary resources to help with that situation.
Kat, you brought up change. Of course, everyone here and everyone on this, everyone in the audience can, has their own experience of all the change that's happened in the last couple of years. Light and Wonder, though, in particular, I know went through a substantial change. Could you talk about the change that your company went through in the last couple of years and how you work to maintain a positive employee experience despite all that change going on?
Oh, sure, I'd love to. One thing that we know is a constant in our organization is we're constantly changing and adapting in different ways to that change and looking for ways to improve our employee experience as a part of that. And so we are the product of, we had a number of acquisitions through the years. And then as we continued to change our focus around where our areas of priority were in terms of our product lines, we've also had some recent divestitures, and we rebranded recently to Light and Wonder as a part of those changes. In the middle of all of that change, of course, we, much like every other company, also adapted to changes around the pandemic. And so literally most of our offices overnight went from being regional offices in which most people engaged or worked with one another inter-office, if you will, as needed, but the majority of their experience was localized. And so overnight we changed our mindset, if you will, and now many of the programs and the offerings that we have, they're very virtual in nature. And what that does is it enables us to engage with one another around the world without being hindered by the borders of office locations. And so to that end, first and foremost, communication is key. In essence, any change that we've had, anytime we're doing something different or taking a different direction, approach, anything of that nature, we have a strong communication plan in place. And that information is shared not only company-wide, but also shared with our leadership and our management so that they have an opportunity to continue to engage in those messages even after the broader communications are shared. Because at the end of the day, your managers and your employees are the ones that engage with one another most closely. And so when any type of change is initiated within the company, the greatest support comes from both your employees and the managers to whom they report. And so it's key for us that both have not only the information that's being shared, but then our managers also have the tools to help answer questions and provide support and address any concerns that may come up as a part of adapting to those changes.
Thanks, Kat. In the spirit of identifying patterns, I'm going to identify another one, and I'd love anybody to jump in on this one. It seems like the most important level for the employee experience is the manager to direct report level and ensuring that relationship remains strong and healthy. I see Larry nodding his head. Yes.
Yes. So, if we look at how HR showed up in the manager-employee relationship 20 years ago, we were in the way. We gave up on the manager and built all this scaffolding to protect them. So ratings and rankings and 9 boxes and checking that they had their goals and development plans. And you're essentially lowering the bar of accountability for that relationship. So as you see modern organizations now rip out all that stuff and enable, I changed the name of my team when I got here from talent management to talent enablement. I'm not managing you. I'm enabling that relationship to have more accountability. I democratized everything. So I started at the bottom of the organization, not at the top, and did the pulse surveys in your team's hands. Just pick one thing to do. Better up coaching all the way down to the bottom of the organization. Everything was to start that relationship accountability to go up. And I think as we saw in pulse surveys through the pandemic, that came true. My manager cares about me. This organization cares about me. So I think that relationship is the key to any organization's success.
Yeah, I love how you describe that, Larry. I love the idea of democratizing it. And I agree with everything you said. And I also think that as things evolve, I think that even the notion of manager employee is itself changing, right? And so, we've seen this in organizations like Zappos with their sort of very interesting system of like teams that form and then morph and then sort of, evolve. And so I think that enablement that you're talking about is the key for sure for the manager employee relationship, but also I think it sets the tone for all the relationships, in the company between colleagues who may eventually become manager employees, and sort of as things morph and evolve, and also in the gig economy where even, people who are attached to an organization may actually be answering to different managers. So I think it sets a really important, as you said, a democratization of it, so that everybody can sort of feel like they are empowered and have the right tools to be able to create the right experience for each other.
I want to talk about global workforces. I think this would apply to even just distributed workforces in a single country, the States, for example. Luciana, HP's workforce is particularly distributed, I know.
Yes, indeed.
How do you think about employee experience specifically across cultures and then across legal requirements that some may require you to do some things in one countries or prohibit you to do certain things? Could you give some examples about how you think about employee experience for your distributed teams?
Yeah, sure. So this one's near and dear to my heart, and I love that you asked it because it is so unique and different. And at the same time, if you're one organization, there needs to be something that ties it all together. So it's sort of like finding that right balance. HP has 50,000 employees across 70-ish countries. Not to mention, many more sites than that. And so it really is. And now, of course, a lot of people working from home, which has multiplied the number of locations where people are working from. So the way we think about it is in terms of networks or sort of federations. And so one of the things that my team put in place was that concept of a council. So people who are representing different parts of the organization, be it in internal communications or in engagement or even in change management, having that input from people around the company at different levels and different roles, and certainly across different locations. And I'm actually lucky enough to be joined here today. I just saw on the participant list my esteemed colleague, Debbie McAlister, who is actually our head of employee engagement at HP, and who herself was involved in one such effort, which was to create ambassadors around the company that served as culture ambassadors to be able to weigh in and provide that really interesting, specific experience of wherever they're calling in from, being able to represent that and make sure that what we're creating centrally takes that into account and enables it, to use one of Larry's terms, so that we all get better together. I think that that's really the ultimate thing that we're going for, is something that there's something that ties us all together. And in our case, the HP way is a very well-known culture and a very iconic and legendary culture. And it's because it has benefited from the input of all those different perspectives globally, which is also something that's very near and dear to my heart, because I come from a multicultural background. I come from a family of diplomats, and so I'm very aware of the importance of representing different cultures and honoring those cultures, but at the same time having something that we're all working for as a concerted effort, so that we can, as a global entity, so that we can get somewhere together. So it's really about balancing those different perspectives.
Annie, you mentioned in your introduction that you're standing up HR operations in the US. How are you thinking about getting started from scratch, and how are you factoring in things like different cultures and what you're doing?
Yeah, it's been an interesting challenge because our headquarters is in Israel and Tel Aviv, and we're fairly well established there. We have a lot of big processes and systems in place as it relates to performance reviews and surveys and all of that. But on some of the more operational level, as it relates to U.S. law and writing our handbook, it's been an interesting challenge of figuring out, for example, parental leave. We want to make sure that we are competitive. We're in the HR space as a business, so we want to be setting the bar as a company and taking a progressive approach. But we also want to make sure that whatever we're putting in place is consistent with what's been established in our other locations in Tel Aviv and London. So it's a very collaborative process of I'm researching internally in the US market to figure out what's competitive here. And then I'm touching base with my team in other parts of the world to see how that compares. Is the approach at least consistent? Is the methodology consistent, so that we have a clear explanation to give to our employees about why there are some differences across borders, but that we have the same the bottom line message and what we care about with our employees is still the same across the board.
Thanks, Annie. My microphone was on mute. Excuse me. I want to remind our audience, anyone who's listening in today, that we will break for a Q&A at 2:45. So if anybody has questions for our panelists, please do put those in the Q&A, and we'll be addressing as many of those as we can as we close up the webinar today. How do you all think about connecting the work that your employees do on a daily basis to something meaningful? So there's all kinds of research, especially of late, where that demonstrates how much meaningful work matters to people, being able to work on something that serves a greater purpose beyond themselves. How do you help employees understand how the work they're doing affects something beyond themselves? Larry?
Yeah, for me, it's two ways. We're a business to business. So like Kat could go in a casino and say, look, we're making people happy, but we're business to business. So what we try to do is tell our customers stories. What does our technology enable our customers to do? So Aston Martin or a hospital, our cloud technology helps save lives. So that's one way. The second one is through our community efforts. We have a NetApp Serves, which is focused on communities and schools and underrepresented technology areas of the world. So, that's a form of leadership and connection that NetApp does as well. So I think telling customer stories and how we're saving lives and how we as volunteers are affecting our communities are two powerful ways.
Great. I hear more and more often about the employee experience in the onboarding process. I think that is important, but because the job market is so incredibly competitive right now, and employers are just trying to fill the open positions that they have to pay even more attention to the employee experience from the very first point of contact, whether that's incoming or outgoing, an incoming application or an outgoing, recruitment outreach. Larry, I'll kick it right back to you. How do you improve the employee experience from day one?
Yeah, from before day one. So, we think of the employee experience across the employee journey from candidate to alumni. But what really has happened since the pandemic hit and the Great Resignation, or whatever term we want to use, is talent has won. Before the pandemic, we were sort of on equal footing. We could pick and choose. Now talent has won. They demand what they want in an organization. So they demand to have a hybrid environment. They demand to have their own choice in how their experience is going to be. So our job at the very beginning, from the recruiter's perspective, is to share that story. So, talk about democratization. We're not telling people when to come back in the office and what days to come back and how many days. We're saying, when do you want to come back and what kind of work do you want to do? And you as teams figure that out. So when the pandemic hit, it was easy. It wasn't easy emotionally or psychologically, but it was easy to just shut the lights out because everyone had to do it. Now we have to turn on 11,500 lights because every individual has their own way now of working. So being able to give people the opportunity to express sort of like, here's how I want to work. And we're like, you can do that here. That's what we want you to do here. So I think a lot of this idea of individual choice and individual power. I was on another panel last week, and someone said the last 25 years was all the focus on the customer. The next 25 years is a lot more focus on the employee and the relationship. So I think the pandemic has had a lot of changes to how we look at talent.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Larry. I was going to add that, we've one of the ways we're enabling that at HP is by providing an onboarding experience that's mostly that has a very strong online component, so that people can actually just do it from their mobile phones. And that has been very successful. We got lucky. I'd like to say we were prescient, but it's sometimes it's smarter to be lucky than it's lucky to be smart, right? And we were definitely lucky because we launched it right before everybody got sent home. You were just reminding us of those early days, and it was godsend because people were able to access the content that they needed from their mobile phone easily. Get the company history, hear from our leaders, cultures, understand about our values, get a checklist of what they were supposed to be doing and which, compliance type things they needed to take care of. So I think to the extent that we can enable that, and so kind of to go back to, there's a certain, I think that the theme here that I'm hearing is that, we're trying to create a certain experience, of course, but how do we, what's the platform to enable that, right? And so this is one of them. This is how do we make smart strategic choices about what we make self-serve and easily self-serve, and then how do we enhance that experience through the connections and the relationships and enabling people to bring their best selves to the table so that they can have those real conversations.
Well, and to piggyback on that, part of an employee experience is the connections that they forge. And so when they come through the door, it's critical for us that they have those connections. And it's something that can be achieved whether the team's remote or on site. I heard once that it was stated that many times we celebrate employees, sometimes when they leave, where we take them to lunch or wish them well, where ideally it should be at both ends of the employee experience. The day that they step in the door, if they're virtual, you may not be able to do a lunch, but you can certainly have a team meeting to welcome them, get to know them, and actually get a better understanding of who they are as an individual. Assign them a buddy or a mentor, if you will, somewhere throughout the organization. The buddy really for the ability to get to know the day-to-day within their job. And it's usually a coworker that actually works with them. And then the mentor is someone within the organization or department that can help provide guidance or direction when the manager is not available. And so all of those components, if you will, help give the employee a better experience in engaging and feeling a sense of connection with the organization. So it's that interpersonal connection, if you will.
Kat, I've certainly been in situations where I'm leaving a job, I'm taken out to lunch by my team, and I think, I didn't know my boss liked me that much. Yeah, you find out on your last day and you're like, well, if I'd been experiencing this, maybe I wouldn't be gone.
Right. People don't leave jobs typically because they don't like what they do. They leave typically because they don't feel a connection with their manager or the leader that they work with. Yeah. That's usually what actually sparks that search. And then it's usually the opportunity that they find that leads them to make the decision to leave. But connections keep people in companies for a very long time because we like to connect and work with one another. We like that sense of teamwork. It's a lot more fun to come to the workplace when you have that.
So I have a quick story about that, Kat. So, when you do an exit interview, you ask someone, why did you leave? And they're always going to say, better job, more money, better job, more money. Because when you're asking them why they're leaving, it's too late. So I said, if you live by an airport, and there's planes flying over all day, you don't really realize it. And then one day you open the window and you're like, well, there's a lot of planes out there. It's a window opening moment. That's what happened. Like I have recruiters hitting me up all the time and I never answer, but something would happen at work that made me open the window and say, let's see what this recruiter has to say. So that's what I want to know. And it's usually something like you're saying, Kat, my boss ignored me or didn't have 2 one-on-ones in a row. And there's these little like micro moments that get people to start opening the window. And anything we do to make sure that those moments don't happen is key to retention.
So I'll add to my pattern list. We have connection. I'll add consistency as well. So consistently maintaining those, offering vehicles for those means of connections, what Luciana was saying. I want to talk about hybrid workforces. So those who work in person and some who work remotely or any combination of the above. How do you think about employee experience for both of those? When you're designing benefits or programs or policies, how much overlap is there? And I want to put this in the context of wanting to make sure both spheres of employees feel valued in equitable ways. Does that make sense? So yeah, let's talk about that. Annie, what are you thinking of there?
So I think the biggest thing here is that I've learned and through making mistakes in the process of trying to figure it out is don't, if you're doing an event that is designed for in person, in the interest of making it equal, don't just make it a virtual event that is live, that's in person, that people remotely can join. It's going to be a terrible experience. So if you're going to have an in-person event, make it an in-person event, and then have an equal number, if possible, of remote only events, so that the people who are not able to come in can experience something that is meant to be remote, and not feel like they are the person on the screen that's not fully experiencing what everyone in the room is feeling. So that's one. And then two is just thinking about the cadence with which you're doing different programming. So we have at Hibob, we have what you just described. We have fully remote people, we have fully in office people, and then we have a mixture. So it's been an interesting challenge of figuring out what the right mix is. But what we've been trying to do is have once a quarter one virtual event that everyone can engage in, but they're all doing it from their computers. There's no one in a building experiencing it together. And then we're also balancing that with ideally once a quarter at least in-person events. But trying to do a hybrid event, just in my experience, is not a productive use of time and money. Yeah, that would be my big learning, and the thing I would discourage anyone else from attempting to do in this environment.
Yeah, I would agree, Annie. I think we've potentially learned a little bit of that the hard way, and there's more stuff that we're going to learn, right, over the next several months as more people are returning to the office, and exactly as you're saying, you know, I think we're going to sort of take chances and sort of see what works and keep what does. One area where I think that we've made significant strides because of the pandemic is in terms of well-being and the offerings that are available there. I mean, everything from like chair yoga, you know, and like working out in the backyard with your kids, to mental health consulting, and making, you know, a lot of support available in ways that that people can choose from, because I think that's really the key in that particular space, in terms of how people want to focus on their well-being, and giving them choices is a really great way to make sure that the resources that companies are investing in are actually used fully. So I think that's one area where we can learn from, and perhaps apply to other parts of the employee experience.
Yeah, so I think you hit on something really good there, Luciana. I think we spent the last year trying to figure out, how are we going to come back to work? And I think the next year or two is, how do we keep people healthy? Well-being is the next phase of the pandemic, the next phase of hybrid work environment. So we do like a no Zoom Friday once a month. We do a wellness day where we just shut down the whole company once a quarter, and just finding ways. We just did a thing with my team where we just had breakout rooms of, what do you need to have boundaries in your life? What could we do from work to have boundaries, right? We've always said the whole person approach is the most important approach. Remember, your phone used to be the reason that you didn't have work-life balance. Then the pandemic hit and you're sitting in your chair in your living room. So well-being, I think, is the next big focus for everyone, because Zoom burnout is real. Our lowest score on our pulse survey was, I don't have boundaries. So I think trying to redraw a demarcation line between work and life, or somehow for everyone's going to be a little different, is going to be a next big focus, I think, for the world.
Before we look into our Q&A from our audience, I'd like to know how your organizations are measuring the employee experience. I think this is where it might be a little bit more difficult, considering the basis of employee experience is this intangible feeling that an employee has at work regarding their colleagues and their manager, and this intangible relationship. So how are you measuring that employee experience, and we'll say testing different programs and policies over time? Annie, how are you doing that at Hibob?
I would look at a couple of different things. The first is, and the most direct assessment of whether a program was successful or not, is just doing really quick pulse surveys. I know that people are getting survey fatigue, and that's a thing that we want to try to avoid. But if you keep it to 3 questions, how would you rate this program? And what did you like best? What would you like to see differently in the future? 3 questions, takes all of 5 minutes. That's a good way to get an immediate understanding of, was this worth our time and money or not? And then on from a bigger picture view, we look at the quarterly employee engagement surveys that we run. We look at employee net promoter score to get a feel for whether the programs that we're putting in place are actually impacting the overall engagement. We can do a singular event that people had fun at, but that doesn't mean that they built connections. It doesn't mean that it's going to make the difference in whether or not they take that call from the recruiter that reached out to them yesterday. So that's really the tricky part, is figuring out the programs that are going to be the difference between someone staying at your company and leaving. They may complain about the snacks all day long on the survey, but the snacks are not what's going to retain an employee. So really trying to look at, ultimately, I think surveys are the best measure. They're not a perfect answer, but they are the best thing that I know of to start to keep a pulse. And if you ask the same questions quarter over quarter, or at whatever frequency you are running your surveys, you can start to see trends. So if you did a certain type of program a few times over the quarter and engagement has gone up, then that's perhaps an indication that what you did was working. But you got to dig in a little further from that data to really understand. You may have to do focus groups. You may have to have some one-on-one conversations to figure out if your hypothesis about that data is actually true. And then you dig a little further. So it's not a perfect answer, but it's a starting point to pushing you in the right direction to directing your engagement initiatives.
Yeah, Annie nailed it. It's hard to add to that because you covered all the bases, Annie, but we've done the same thing at HP. So, and in fact, my esteemed colleague who is on the line, it was the driver of a lot of it. So we do our annual survey, which is the more focused, more in-depth one. It's 30-ish questions, and we're able to compare year to year. But then we also do monthly pulse surveys, and those are focused on particular issues or items that we want to revisit from say 6 months to the next 6 months. We change them, but we call it quick clicks, and this was Debbie's idea, who's on the line. But so it's like 5 to 7 questions, really quick to respond to. But it allows us to compare depending on which questions we pick, and we rotate them in and out to be able to have that compare over time. And in our case, what's been great is that we're now able to tell the story that from the first survey that we did after we separated from the Hewlett-Packard company in 2016 to the last survey that we did, we were able to increase our engagement by 30%. And so that's kind of at the macro level. It demonstrates that all of those little interventions that you're talking about, Annie, that that we can measure and say, was this successful or not, that they're all adding up to something more significant and bigger. And of course, that drives attrition as well.
All right, let's move into our Q&A. We have some good questions, but if anyone in the audience has something they would like to add, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. We'll get to as many as we can. The first one is, what are traditionally the most fraught or hard to fix parts of the employee experience? It's the ones that no one wants to talk about. Larry.
Well, for us, it's barriers to execution. Right? Like getting things done inside the company is sometimes difficult, and you could pick on different departments or different areas. So anything that I think is majorly cross-functional is fraught with employee experience issues, because it's a lift. It's a big lift. You need many people with many different goals in mind to work together to solve a barrier to execution. So I think that one is, for us, that one we're working on all the time.
Kat, what about you at Light and Wonder?
I think it can be bandwidth at times. while we want employees to have a great experience, we also don't want it to be an added stressor because of competing priorities throughout the organization. So one of the key areas that we're cognizant of is whenever we have an event or we have anything that we're launching that would potentially be a benefit or of interest to employees, that we also encourage our leadership and our management to be very engaged in those events or initiatives as well. And to ensure that they carve out the time and that they encourage their employees' participation and attendance for those that have an interest in that particular area. And because by doing that, then that makes the employee a lot more comfortable taking the time to actually engage or enjoy whatever's being offered.
Thanks. The next question is from Amy. We have moved to a virtual, online, self-directed orientation for day one. We're redesigning our orientation content, but keeping it as online self-directed e-learning. What recommendations do you have for delivering a positive employee experience on day one when it is virtual and self-directed? I'm especially interested to hear about the self-directed piece. Annie, I saw you maybe move to unmute.
I'm also curious about the self-directed element. I'm curious if that means that it's fully self-paced and there's no, whether or not they're engaging with other employees, either HR manager or their other peers that are onboarding. My view is that a blended approach is always best. It's great to have self-paced learning as part of the orientation experience. It's they're absorbing a lot of information, and giving them the time to do it at a pace that feels right for them is great, and automating the things that don't need to be live sessions. But I think it's also really important, going back to the point about connection, to have face-to-face, or at least virtually face-to-face interactions with human beings, so they feel like that someone's watching out for them, and that they are forming bonds with people as part of that new hire experience. Because ultimately that's the thing that we keep saying is what's going to keep people engaged and retained at their company, is if they feel like they're connected to people and their peers at work. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, I think that was great. And Amy has said, yes, fully self-paced and solo. So they are flying free. All right. I really like this question. Of course, I've lost it now. It's about taking care of employee experience for hybrid workforces, specifically as it relates to inclusion and belonging, which I think is really, really important. In office is going to be completely different experience than out of office. What are you all doing about making sure those employees feel included and that they belong? Also, if you could address this in terms of advancement opportunities, that would be great, and making sure everyone has equitable access to those. Anyone who wants to tackle this one?
We brought in a vendor that we call it the Opportunity Marketplace, Mosaic, where you can plot out your career with the AI help. So what I'm saying is that shrinks the world. So if you're an underrepresented group who feels like I have to be on the in group to find a job, that's no longer true. You have direct access to any job at a company. If you live farthest away from headquarters and you feel like, I got to know people in headquarters to move up, that's not true anymore either. So that's the front end, right? You can plot your career and talk to your boss around it and apply directly. But secondarily, on the back end, I can look at that data to say, are underrepresented groups getting the same opportunities, trying for the same opportunities, moving at the same pace? And then you tie that with the pulse survey data. If people are either underrepresented or always been remote, how do those things tie together? So I always say anything we want to do with employee experience has to be rooted in some kind of data. And you have to define what employee experience means for your company, because it's a giant topic. It can mean so many things. So we came up with 3 what we call expectations, employee experience expectations. One, you should expect to be happy at this company. And what does that mean to you? We asked that question. That's one of our engagement questions. Happiness is a driver for engagement. Second, you should feel inspired by what our products do, what we do in society, what your work is should be inspired. And the third one is no boundaries. And that really came into effect with the pandemic. So this idea of no boundaries in your career, no boundaries of where you work, no boundaries on what you can do. So we define these three expectations to say, this is what employee experience means here. If you just drop the term employee experience, it's just too big. It's just too big. So that's some advice I would give.
Yeah, I love that, Larry. Can I also add that I think the key to understanding where the levers are is something you mentioned earlier as well, which is listening and then actually acting on what you heard. And so we did that during the pandemic ourselves. Well, because as we all recall, it wasn't just the pandemic; it was also the racial issues that we all became very attuned to over the last couple of years. That made a very, I think, fruitful conversation take place in the workplace. And so what we did was we actually had focus groups for our underrepresented communities, and we identified who those groups were, and then we had conversations that were targeted to each of the groups. And then now we're acting on that data, to your point, in addition to other data that we have about their movement and how we want to make sure that we're giving people opportunities to advance in their careers and so forth. So it's the combination of what people are saying and what they're doing and how we can help to move that.
I'd like to answer this question from Jesse. Hi, we are a startup with about 15 people struggling to set up a review process. What are some things that you suggest for implementing and keeping this process on track to keep both sides happy? Who's recently tackled a review process or not recently?
Okay, I took a stab at that one because I worked for a startup years ago. And what we did is we didn't do a formal review process because we were so small. But instead we engaged in what I like to call 10-10s, where we scheduled regular meetings between the supervisor and employee. And it was on a weekly basis, 30 minutes. And essentially what you're guaranteeing is the employee has 10 minutes to share whatever they feel their roadblocks are, successes, areas that they're working, and you have 10 minutes of guaranteed uninterrupted time as the manager to share where you see the progress in whatever has been assigned or areas of responsibility for that employee. But you also ensure that you have an extra 10 minutes built in to allow for additional conversation or any areas that come up. And you may adjust that accordingly to what the needs of your team are. So that they may be a week, they may be more frequently, they may be longer. But it's consistent feedback. And then make sure that you have a mechanism just to follow or track or ensure that you're providing some kind of written follow-up, if you will. Where both sides are very clear on where the progress is, what's being accomplished, where is the additional progress that's currently still in the works. And so it's not a formal review process, if you will, but in essence, it captures a lot of the same feedback and understanding that you're looking to provide both the employee and for the manager to be able to assess without necessarily limiting it to a quarterly or an annual type of formal review. Because you're so small, you have the freedom in essence to engage and provide that feedback more frequently and a little bit less formally, if you will.
Great. Thanks, Kat. We are just about out of time. We have about a minute and a half left. So I like this last question, maybe put it to just two of you with really brief answers. What's on your own development plan for the next year ahead to stay on the leading edge of employee experience as a discipline? So who are you reading? What key thought leaders are you following? Just maybe two people throw out really quick what they're looking at right now to get new ideas. Annie?
So for me, I want to get back out into the HR community. I think I've been in a bit of a lull, just trying to keep my head down and get my job done. Now the world is coming back alive again, and I'm seeing HR communities get back in person. So I want to have more in-person connections so I can learn from my peers in the community.
I'm going to throw out two names, Adam Grant and Brene Brown, not necessarily attached to this particular field, but because they are so enlightened in sharing a real human experience, and so that we can learn from and apply.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Annie, Larry, Kat, and Luciana, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to kick it right back to Steve.
Thanks, Emily, and to all of you speakers for a really thoughtful and dynamic conversation. I was really candid as well. I like what you said about talking frankly about bandwidth and the difficulty of getting anything done across departments. I've been there in big companies. Thank you again to our sponsor, Hibob, and to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website at fromday1.co and check out more of our upcoming webinars. This Thursday, March 24th, we'll be talking about the next step for fertility benefits, covering all genders. The following Thursday, March 31st, we'll be talking about ensuring women's career growth and retention in the new work environment. And Tuesday, April 5th, we'll be talking about addressing power, privilege, and racial equity in your organization. So thank you all. Stay well.